Good morning. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. I want to discuss a subject many Jews have difficulty with, and I confess sometimes I have difficulty with this. There are certain areas of life where absolute, unquestioning obedience to authority is critical. In Japan, there's a volunteer firefighter group, and when someone wants to join, after being approved and trained, there's an initiation rite. So the initiate faces the fire chief. So they're standing facing each other. The deputy chief turns to the chief and says, "Chief, what color is this?" And he holds up a piece of white paper. And the chief says, "Black." The chief turns to the initiate and says, "What color is this?" And the initiate says, "Black as night." And then he's in. Because an individual firefighter must act on orders immediately because they can't see the entire picture. And lives depend on following orders. And the same is true in the military, with exceptions in very extreme circumstances. But lives depend on following orders. However, in the rest of life, the Torah advocates that although, of course, we have to follow what God says, that goes without question. But we are encouraged to have independent thinking. When it comes to following what our parents say, what our teachers say, what our rabbi says, we are encouraged to have independent thinking because we are responsible for our choices. That's what it means to become bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. It means that if somebody tells me to do something, it is my choice whether to do it or not. And if what I was told to do, regardless of who told me, if what I was told to do was wrong and I chose to do that wrong thing, I am responsible, not the person who told me to do it. And yet, when it comes to questions of Jewish law and Jewish values and Jewish practice, every single one of us needs an authority who will guide us. Someone, a rabbi, a teacher that we respect, whose opinion in Jewish law, Jewish values, Jewish practice, we will follow. This is the passage in this week's Torah portion. The Torah says, in the Parsha of Shoftim, Ki polei mimcha davar lemishpat, when there shall be a question in your mind as to what is the correct practice in life that relates to Jewish law, or a dispute, ubasa el hakohanim halviim vel hashofet asher yiyeh b'yamim hahem, you should go to the judges, to the authorities, to those who are qualified to answer questions of Jewish law in your day. Meaning, it's got to be someone that you can contact. V'asis al pi hadavar asher yagidu lecha, and you have to follow what they say. Lo sasur min hadavar asher yagidu lecha yamin u'shmol. Do not avert, do not change from what they told you, neither to the left nor to the right. You have to listen. If you ask a question in Jewish law of someone who is qualified to answer that question, you have to follow the answer. Sometimes you may agree, sometimes you may disagree, but it's not up to you. Every single Jewish person needs a rabbi to guide them. Every single one of you needs a rabbi to guide you. I need a rabbi to guide me. Every single Jew needs this. Of course, in choosing a rabbi, in choosing an authority that I'm going to follow, of course, I have to choose someone that I respect to the level that I don't just agree with them. I don't just follow what they say when I agree with them, that I am willing to accept their opinion and to follow their opinion because I respect them so much, even if it's not the answer I'm looking for. And if I don't have that level of respect, then that's not the guide for me. That's not the rabbi for me. Because asking questions in Jewish law is not about answering them myself if I'm not qualified to answer them. So I have to find a person and then stick with that person and follow what they say and turn neither to the left nor to the right. Okay, so that involves my free choice of who to choose for their expertise and their sensitivity and their values. But Rashi says something that's quite amazing. The verse says, don't turn away from the word that they tell you, neither to the left nor to the right. Meaning, do what they say, and don't ignore the advice. Rashi says something amazing. Rashi says, Afilu omer lecha al yamin shehu small, val small shehu yamin. Even if the person you ask a question tells you that right is left and left is right, still you have to follow them. Now that's an incredible statement. How is it possible that we are being told, commanded, according to Rashi, in this verse, commanded that we are to follow a wise person, an authorized expert in Jewish law, even when that person is wrong? When the person says right is left and left is right, it's just a mistake. Maybe I should just say, with all due respect, right is right and left is left. You're just making a mistake. So I want to share with you a very important answer. I heard this answer from Rabbi Yitzchak Berkowitz, and I also heard this many years ago from Rabbi Shlomo Riskin. And they both say as follows. If you go to a person who's an expert in Jewish law, and the person that you trust, and the person that you ask, and the person that you follow, and they say to you, east is west, and west is east. In that case, you don't follow them, because they've clearly made a mistake. Anybody can make a mistake. If they say east is west and west is east, that's a mistake. You're not obligated to follow that. We don't just blindly follow whatever somebody says. That's not our approach to Judaism. We have to respect, we have to look into it. But if they say east is west and west is east, I have to say, respectfully, I'm just sorry, but that's just a mistake. And either you need to correct your mistake or I have to go ask somebody else. However, if they say to you, right is left and left is right, that's a different situation. Because which way is right and which way is left? Well, I'll show you. This way is right and this way is left. Is that correct? Well, it depends where you're standing. Right and left is not a question of right or wrong, it's a question of perspective. If you and I are standing parallel, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, facing the same way, so then for both of us, left is left and right is right. But if I'm standing here and you're standing facing me, my left is your right. My right is your left. In other words, what Rashi is teaching is, if there's a mistake in objective fact, of course we don't have to follow that. But when your teacher, your authority, the person that you trust, tells you right is left and left is right, what they are really saying to you is, your perspective is not correct. The answer to your question is based on how you are standing. What is your perspective? And so my answer to you that right is left and left is right means to say to you that your assumptions are incorrect. The foundation, the underlying principle that you are using to think about that is not correct. And that's why you don't understand my answer. And so what I'm saying to you is, you need to change your perspective. You need to change the way you're standing in order to see that the answer that I'm giving you is correct. Very, very often, the answer to a difficult question in Jewish law, Jewish values, Jewish practice, relates not so much to the yes or no, but much more to the perspective with which to approach it. I shared this with you some time ago, and I keep thinking about it. COVID started. All of us, rabbis, were faced with questions we had never faced before in our lives. I had never faced the question of closing a shul. I had never faced the question of shortening davening to make it only 20 minutes long, even on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I never faced these questions. Okay, so I have rabbis. And I turned to them. And they gave me guidance, and I followed their guidance. One of the people that I turned to, and that Jews all over the world turned to, who set the procedures and policies for so much of the Jewish people, was Rabbi Herschel Schacter. He should live and be well. One of the greatest authorities in Jewish law in our time, in every subject. And I remember the story. This is the introduction to the story. The story was that, of course, he is a teacher. He's a Rebbe in Yeshiva University. And so during that week, you'll remember, leading up to things being closed, first in New York and then a few days later in Montreal. And he was sitting in the Beit Midrash in the study hall with his office nearby and his students and all of his books, all of his sources, all of his notes, everything there. And there was a certain day, and his doctor called him and said, Rav Schacter, it's not safe for you to stay there. You have to leave. He has a summer home in the Catskill Mountains in Tannersville. So the doctor said, you have to leave. You can't be with other people. Go to your place in Tannersville. Rav Herschel Schacter picked up his talis and tefillin, walked out of the building, and drove to Tannersville, New York. And that's where he stayed for months and months and months. So he had his talis and tefillin. He didn't have any of his notes. He didn't have any of his collection of sources to be able to check. And immediately, questions came at him from individuals, from rabbis all over the world, nonstop. What do we do? How do we deal with this? And he guided the Jewish people along with a couple of other people. He guided the Jewish people through something that none of us had ever experienced. A few months later, he gave an interview to the OU magazine, Jewish Action, the magazine put out periodically by the Orthodox Union. And they were talking about how he was able to respond to all these questions. And so the interviewer asked the question, Rebbe, you are getting questions 24 hours a day from all over the world, questions that no one had ever asked before in our lifetime. And you were alone in Tannersville without your resources, without your notes, without your the sources you rely on. How in the world did you answer those questions? And he said, and you know, there's no one else in the world besides Rabbi Herschel Schacter that could give this answer. He said, the truth is, it wasn't that difficult to answer the questions. Now, I read the first line of that answer, and I almost fainted. Because, okay, Rabbi Herschel Schacter, for you to say it wasn't so difficult, okay. But the rest of us had no idea what we were doing. But I thought about it a little bit, and I read the next paragraph. He said, it really wasn't so difficult. Once you understand that COVID presented a situation of safek sakanas nefashos, the possibility of threat to life, then the answers are all clear. Yes, you close the shul. Yes, you shorten the davening. Yes, you omit this. Yes, of course, this is how you do this. This is what you're required to do. Yes, of course, you're required to follow all of the mainstream medical opinions. Of course, that's not difficult once you understand that you are dealing with the perspective of the possibility of threat to life. Jewish law is very clear. If your perspective in life as a halachic authority is that shalom bayis is a very, very important goal, then lots of the questions that people ask, it's not so much the yes or no, it's the perspective. Here's the priority. If your perspective is that there is a mitzvah of dina malchus adina, we're required to follow the laws of the land. That's an obligation. Yes, it has certain limits, but when it applies, it applies. If that's your perspective, then so many questions that people ask, it's not a question so much of the yes or no answer. It's a question of the perspective. Now, I do not mean to say that the answers will necessarily be different depending on a person's perspective. But the perspective should be transparent. And if over time a person finds that the perspective of a person, of a rabbi they've been following, is not something they can value, it may happen that a person has to change who they ask their questions to. But you have to have someone, and I have to have someone, that I can trust, not only even when I don't understand or I disagree, especially when I don't understand or disagree. Because what that means is someone that I trust, someone that I respect is telling me I need to look at this with a different perspective. East and West, that's one issue. But right and left, there I need to trust the person in whom I place my trust. My friends, I want to wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you all soon in person. Today is Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first day of the month of Elul, and today we start to blow the shofar every morning in shul at the end of davening. Have a great day.